We are recording. Welcome today. So I realized today that I want to talk about something that I have not spoken much about yet on the internet um, or in podcasts. But it's a big part of my work and my private life. And it's something that I am seeing right now in a really big way. And I guess what inspired me to speak to this was um, a few days ago, I read this caption from someone who I follow on Instagram, who I really enjoy, love his work. And he said that, the most difficult time in a man's life currently is age 18 to 24. And then he went into why and the struggles that men are facing in that age. And it really hit me because that age, from a biological, genetic standpoint, like what is happening for a man in that phase of his life from 18 to 24 is like it essentially, in many levels, the physical prime. I'm not saying that physicality doesn't evolve as men get older. Obviously, it does, but that level of um, drive and ambition and fearlessness, and all these things that are completely natural, necessary in our human evolution. Um, that are really present in young men of that age and are completely suppressed by our current culture. Those elements are so necessary for us to evolve healthily as a human race. And because of the time we live in, where masculinity has been deemed toxic, and essentially we live in a culture or time where masculinity is, for the most part, absent in terms of like true, genuine, healthy, embodied, normalized, regulated, mainstream um, life, that the true healthy masculinity is absent. And by that I mean like the energy of protection and provision and leadership and vision, which is something that we require. Um, we're certainly in the part of the world that I live in, there's very little actual physical danger. I mean, we're not like fighting off wild animals. There's no war where I live. Um, yes, there's violence, but for the most part, violence is something that we hand over to authority to deal with, right? Like it's not like we live in a culture that's absent of violence. I'm not talking about, obviously there's like domestic violence, there's still all kinds of violence, but we're a way less violent day-to-day culture because we've handed violence over to authorities who are going to then take charge of the situation and deal with it however they see fit. But going back to this quote that, or not quote, but Instagram story that I saw where it was talking about how this is the hardest time for men, like it totally makes sense, because rather than being engaged in things that, feed off and amplify and actually use that energy that is present in men of that age group, um, to create a valuable contribution to society, they are essentially shunned. And as a result, we have, all sorts of problems. If you think about it, that age group is like, they are the age who is going to go out and forge new paths, who's going to, if there is a war, historically or traditionally, that age group of men, as well as men who are older for sure, but that age group would be the warriors, would be the ones fighting, defending, protecting. And also, that age group, I believe, is intended to be the ones who are forging new paths. And so when I sat with that, yeah, I see it everywhere in our cultures. Like we're very much geared towards we basically live in a time where all of that energy is suppressed and not honed and funneled as it should be. And this is present everywhere from porn addiction to working these like mediocre 9 to 5 jobs where your progress is that maybe every 6 months you get a $5 raise, where there's very low levels of personal responsibility required in these individual young men. They're not um, either not like collectively as in our like mainstream society, there's not that normalization of like, wow, you are in your physical prime. You have this incredible human form that is intended to be used for great things. And they're not experiencing what happens when you push your body beyond what you think it is physically capable of, or your mind. And and that I believe is the root of depression, all the like modern day problems that men are experiencing, as well as of course low testosterone. And so then you add that in with like consumption of pornography, substances, whatever it is, coffee, weed, like there's so many substances that are essentially normalized in our culture that actually reduce your levels of testosterone or your levels of like life force. And then add that we're all, it's all literally like in your pocket. You have a cell phone where your attention can so easily be hijacked. Now, on the flip side of this, what I am seeing more and more of, and have had the pleasure of working with a handful of men like this, they're like, wow, okay, this is what's happening. And I'm going to develop this like the thing is in this culture that we live in right now, it's actually not hard to be wildly successful because the level of individual discipline and leadership that is present in the masses is so devastatingly low. And so I see I'm talking about young men. Of course, I work with men and women of all ages, but right now I feel called to speak specifically to that age group. I see them, realizing this and then decided to act on it and activate that, and then essentially choosing their own self-discipline, which is hard to develop when you've been, conditioned to go to school and, essentially not do your best. Very few people are actually designed for the school system or to thrive there. And, I see them beginning to take back control of their own lives, like of themselves, and developing that inner leadership and, waking up at 5, 6 a.m. and going for a run and lifting weights and reading and, developing a business and, still going to their 9 to 5 job while they're developing a business or whatever it is. And, giving up on casual dating or not giving up casual dating, giving up, like seeing the detriment of pornography and how it's affecting their brains and letting that go. And then like I've seen this happen with individual young men, and then they start to like find the others, like they find other men who are on the same path, and they're, suddenly they're like, instead of hanging out and drinking on the weekends, they're like hanging out and building something, like literally building something, whether it's like rebuilding a vehicle or building a house or building a business or going on adventures together and hiking and traveling and hosting parties, like whatever it is that they're doing, they're taking that initiative. That like that energy exists in all of us. It exists in me. I've had 4 kids, and I'm not a man aged 18 to 24, obviously, but I have that energy of like initiative and of being able to like see what's happening in our culture and see a new future and move towards it and be willing to like fight for it and work for it and be disciplined about it and not succumb to addiction or the culture around me that's like, very committed to mediocrity. Really, there's no other way to say it. And so this is what I mean by that it's easy to be wildly successful if you can crack that code. And I was thinking about it the other day because I started to research and look into Andrew Tate because, of course, I'm like, well, who is this guy? Like, he's been canceled. I've heard a lot of things about him being incredibly misogynistic. I've seen clips of his work that's like, ooh, did you really say that? That's pretty awful. And then I started to like look further into it, as well as like clips that had been like cut and edited to, of course, portray him in a certain way. And I mean, the conclusion I came to is like, of course, this guy has been canceled because he is speaking to that demographic. He's speaking to, whether intentionally or not, he's speaking to young men to take back the leadership of their own lives, to become healthy and fit in mind, body, and spirit, and financially to be independent, to activate themselves. And of course, that having someone like that is dangerous. I mean, we live in a time where people are incredibly easily controlled and manipulated. Again, through that information, living in this information era, as well as just like an overall soft, sedentary lifestyle where we don't have a lot of natural danger to keep us, sharp and to keep us united, right? So we have actually a very dysfunctional culture where there's a lot of division and depression and people living living a lot like machines, even though we of course have like I said, like less violence and different things that are present for us in our culture. But when I think about, what if you think about what happened in the world if young men were to collectively, drop their addictions, their porn addiction, their whatever, Instagram, like all of the sort of online wasting your time, watching TikTok, watching Netflix, like it's not just pornography, it's in many forms. If they were to stop that consumption and focus on training their minds and bodies and training themselves to become, the modern day, like hunter gatherer, go out and, kill a bison or whatever that you can feed your family, your tribe with. The modern day equivalent of that is someone who can go out and crush it as an entrepreneur, who can go out and make a lot of money. And to be able to, bring all of those things together, like not just be a wizard in the sort of like earning money realm, but also to be deeply committed to physical well-being, training your body. The human body is naturally a weapon. It is, whether you are afraid of it or not. We all have the capacity for violence within us. We all have that. We all have hands and feet and, the ability to hold weapons in our hands. And not only that, but also our minds and our words can be like weapons. And yet very few people are taking on that responsibility of learning to hone and control. And I would say this is more relevant for men than women, mostly because men naturally have more aggression and they also hold that natural role of protection, which, women can step into, and we also can carry that role. But that willingness to actually train your physical body and understand what your body is capable of, and understand that the more that you train that, the less, like the safest people to be around are also the people who can do the most damage because they are in that training of honing their bodies to be like weapons of precision. They're also learning how to do the least amount of damage possible. And I like personally think that this is what, going back to my original thing that I want to talk about of men between the age of 18 and 24 being the most difficult time in their lives, like for sure it is because they're not doing these things. They're not getting up every morning and going and running and training. They're not going up and joining with other men to train in martial arts or sports or um, learning to use their mind to um, create and produce value in the world and not learning to be leaders of themselves. And without that, they all become like citizens of the state and super easily controlled. But also, of course, we have incredibly high depression and suicide um, in men, and I mean, and in women as well. But it's like it's because they're not in their instinctual natural state of like actually needing to be constantly like testing themselves physically, mentally, um and as a group. Like this is how men are meant to be together, to like literally, we have not evolved biologically at the same speed as we have technologically. So you have people on a day-to-day basis where like we're biologically very much the same as we were thousands of years ago when we were like hunter gatherers and like getting together as a group and going and hunting big animals, which was like a huge rush and a huge amount of like energy and unity and people working together, and then celebration and feasting, all of that. Instead of that, which is what we are still biologically programmed for that. Instead of that, we're in this era where people are consuming more information on a day-to-day basis than people would have in a lifetime. And consuming information about like everybody around the world, consuming it, like the endless ideological debates of like, well, is this the right way to live your life, or is that the right way to live your life? Because people's lives genuinely lack like basic meaning of survival, because we don't need that. Like you want to get some food, you just drive to Whole Foods and fill your card, whip out your card and like pay for it. It's very, very different. And so bringing that back into your own personal life, if this is you, whether you're 18 to 24-year-old young man or anyone else in life, if you are able to unplug from that collective programming and choose your own self leadership and choose to create a life that is like healthy and wholesome and in alignment with your true values, where you are pushing yourself and you are experiencing newness every day, that is not newness in the form of, I saw this really cool show on Netflix, newness in the form of, I went and did something for the first time. I went and rode a horse for the first time. I went and climbed a tree that I've never climbed before. I went and, jumped in the freezing cold ocean. I went and started a business. I went and like took my business to the next level. I went and created a genuine, authentic relationship with a man or a woman. Like these are things that our society is in mass confusion around. And I believe so much of it stems back to literally having that inner leadership that we all possess be something that we're willing to hand over to someone else, to through the consumption of information, through being willing to have other people tell us what is right and wrong and how we should live our lives and what we should do with our health. And um, how we should live. And I see this even in my youngest son who's 13. Like, he asked me something last night. I wish I could remember what it was, but we were talking about something like that's what it was, pollution and global warming. And he was like, well, what's your opinion on that? And it was this immediate thing of like, you have to have an opinion about everything. But and like, I personally, if I am not going to do something about it, I'm not going to spend a lot of time researching something and trying to find the bottom of, whether it's true or not, unless I'm going to. And this was an agreement I made with myself a long time ago because I saw the trap that people get into where they become addicted to informing themselves. Meanwhile, their personal lives are falling apart. They're, not really applying what they're learning to actually affecting change in the world. They're like taking in all this information without doing anything with it, without taking inner leadership, without being in full leadership of their own lives, of their mind, of their body, of like bringing the connection between their spirit and their human experience into play in this life. And it's actually just another distraction, this addiction to being informed and having an opinion on everything. And it literally has brought the energy of the human being up out from the body and all up here. And this is this time that we're in where if you can drive that energy back into your body and be fully embodied in your human form, and then untether yourself from the collective, develop your commitment to yourself and your own devotion to yourself, to what you see inside of you, and then develop discipline around that, and daily consistent habits that are moving you forward in the direction that you want to go. You are actually naturally going to be a leader in this time. Leaders are not something that people who like anoint themselves like, I'm the leader. Like, leadership happens naturally and often accidentally, simply by being willing to go first, by being willing to develop inner leadership that is so great that people can't help noticing that you've got something going on that they want to be a part of. I'm gonna wrap it up there, but I really wanted to share this message with you today, and let me know how it went.